Welcome to Philanthropy Geek. This week, I had an amazing chat with a banker, a volunteer extraordinaire who's been on many boards. He spent his career doing everything he can to interact with his community. He's like most bankers I know, especially the small, locally owned banks, right? Who are always asked and they respond, even if they're not the ones that can join the board. Many times they are the ones that assign other people in the organization to be a part of the board, right? And what did he have to say about his concern about nonprofits right now? He's the first line of defense. Banks and other foundations, they're seen as having that extra cash flow, right? And in emergency situations or situations where other funding is cut off, many people approach them. And he is seeing a very high uptick of extra and special asks for donations. I'm sure if you are involved in any organization like a bank or a foundation or a financial institution of maybe advisors, you're seeing this also. Or maybe you're just an employee of a larger corporation that is known to be philanthropic. You are seeing an uptick in these asks. And he is in a quandary. He doesn't have a bottomless pit of donations. He's doing everything he can. He's also parsing, spacing, triaging for organizations that their bank has relationships with. The stronger the relationship, and this goes without saying, we know this, but let's say it out loud. It doesn't go without saying. Let's say it out loud. The stronger the relationship, the higher the likelihood they're going to be able to do that larger donation in a pinch. He was chatting about a nonprofit that does an event to raise money. He was asked to participate in that event. Unknown to him and unknown to the committee, the philanthropy committee at the bank had already made a donation. It wasn't as large as other speakers' organizations had made. And the nonprofit had approached him and said, other speakers that you'll be interacting with and have sponsored at X amount, but your bank is only sponsoring at Y amount. And the reason was they had not coordinated and communicated within the bank with both the philanthropy committee and their speaker. He was able to, on a last minute request, double the donation for the organization. And so he was pointing out that the tie of him speaking created an opportunity for the nonprofit to receive a higher level gift, where his bank, if he weren't speaking, was a lower level gift. Other areas are when you find out, he says, that say, the tellers are participating in a Blue Jean Friday for an organization and they care deeply about it and they are raising money in the lowest paid area of the bank in a concerted effort and taking money out of their hard-earned paychecks to support an organization I feel very deeply about. He said, our committee is going to notice that and give more to that relational organization, especially if that organization is asking both the philanthropic committee and rewarding with attention and communication the tellers who are doing the Blue Jean Friday. Right. Relationships pre-engaged create an avenue of fundraising, right? An avenue to not just fundraising, but an avenue to accelerate the gift during an emergent situation. This should not be news to anyone. But when I was sitting with that very involved, very philanthropic banker, it was kind of a revelation on his part. We go about our business doing our day to day. He in his case, making it so that his bank is both connected with the community and receiving opportunities to lend money and invest money and have new customers, right? That's his job. He not only is supposed to be engaging with the community, but he's supposed to be building the bank's base. We go about our business making sure that our mission is fulfilled. And in order to fulfill our mission, we have to raise money. And we have to make sure that our relationship building is continuous and in depth. How deep are your relationships? Have you had 3 years of Blue Jean Friday with that bank? If you have, celebrate that. Who is in charge of organizing Blue Jean Friday? Maybe it rotates every year. Maybe it's a different person because that is a platform for the bank to promote people from within. Many times it is. Don't lose track of your past organizer. Many times that past organizer moves on to a different company, a different bank, or even a different company altogether. But they're a go-getter and an involved person. Don't lose track. I have personally seen in a Blue Jean Friday in a bank situation, nobody knew who coordinated that in the bank. When we approached the bank and asked if we could do an extra special thank you, we have had a therapy dog join the organization over that year, and we were including the therapy dog in some of our thank you visits to organizations like that bank. So we brought the therapy dog. It was so cute, a Labradoodle. He's so engaging, and put a blue jean scarf on his neck and went to thank the organization. We found out that a vice president of the bank had originated the Blue Jean Friday. Subsequently, she had risen up in the bank and made sure they did the Blue Jean Friday. After that visit and acknowledging her creativity of starting the outreach and raising the money, which was about $1,000 every year, they did a Blue Jean Friday every single day of the week, every Friday of the year, and collected donations. You could wear blue jeans even if you didn't give the donation. And large donations were given over the year by individuals throughout the whole building, like the president. So they coordinated it. The front line tellers coordinated it, but it was originated by a now vice president of the bank. So you're tracking what I'm saying here. Subsequently, she ended up being a major donor and still is to this day. Every single year, she gives a major gift, and they still do the Blue Jean Friday. So these kind of relationships are the pathway to making sure you not only have consistent funding, but when you need to go ask that extra special gift. And this isn't my visit with a banker was different than that bank. It was a different banker, but it was a similar story. He was saying he's receiving a multitude of asks right now in desperation, and he's having to say no to some, or he's having to give a very small gift to some because he can't do everything, and he is focusing on those that he's already built a relationship with. I know that relationships take time. They take time, and that means your organization has to pay for the time up front. I will say, I have seen that time be rewarded very, very quickly. Please like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this on the audio podcast, please subscribe and follow. But I'd like you to think about sharing this information and looking a little further into perhaps some coaching. There's a link for coaching below. And I know from experience that I can make this happen very quickly. So I know I can coach you into making um, an investment into time of building relationships pay for itself very quickly. In the past few years, I've worked with an organization that when we started working together, they had about 30 donors and were making about 15,000 a year. They're an older organization and they used to had made many more than that. So we knew they had past donors out there. Some have passed away. That was okay. One of the things we did was we went back into their QuickBooks. Now, this took time, and they had to invest in an employee going back and scraping those names, and then we had to put them into a donor management software. We put in as much history as we could find. If they bought a ticket to a gala, that was put in. If they had made a donation of $100, but they hadn't made it in 5 or 6 years, that was put in. We did go back 7 years. We wanted to get at least 100 names, and that seems very small. But I will tell you, we ended up with about approximately 125 names, and within 4 months, we had made $70,000. $70,000 in 4 months by going back and finding people who had a relationship with us. And we immediately started, we didn't just start asking them for money. We started reaching out by phone. The executive director and the volunteer coordinator and a couple of volunteers, reaching out to them by phone, chatting with them, asking them how they were doing, asking them where would they like to see themselves in a relationship with the organization. If you make 100 phone calls of people who have at least some tie with you, you're going to see an immediate financial return. You just are. And that is how you begin. So if you're interested in that kind of coaching and walking you through this relationship building, fundraising, so you can get your feet underneath you, the link is below. I'd be happy to chat with you. The first 30 minutes are free, and then I have coaching packages. So that was the ad. So to continue, how do you build that relationship? Well, the best time to build that relationship was last year or 10 years ago. But the second best time to build that relationship is today. And just as I was speaking of, taking 100 people, 100 human beings that have some tie, even if they just attended your gala, even if they gave you $50 5 years ago, right? And start there. And I would suggest you start with a phone call and build from there. You can start with a phone call that leads to a cup of coffee if you would like. The more personal, the more one-on-one, the better. That was the same organization that built the relationship with the Blue Jean Friday group. So as part of that coaching, we also looked at groups that were doing lump sum donations. The Blue Jean Friday group at a bank. The Home Depot the year before had done a employee Christmas time donation to this organization for, I think it was $300. So you start looking at those companies that the organization has received small, modest donations over the years, and you go back also 5 to 7 years, you'll have a handful, right? You will. You say, well, what? Those employees are probably not even there. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. And even if those employees aren't there, the Home Depot will be glad to hear from you and chat with you. And you can even come in and chat with the staff many times at their group meeting on things your organization can help with. Maybe you are a food pantry. Maybe you are an organization that helps do repairs on people's homes. What a tie in, right? Maybe you're a domestic violence organization and the bank, actually all banks are self-reporters. They have a mandatory reporters, excuse me. They're mandatory reporters if they see violence or abuse connected with somebody's income, say Social Security or anything else. If you're seeing cruelty or any way uh, abuse with somebody with their funding, they have to report that. Many times they report it to the Area Agency on Aging and don't even know that a domestic violence organization actually helps with that person if with the actual abuse within the home. Um, so, and that I brought that up with the banker I just was casually speaking with the other day, and he said he did not know that, and he would love to have his local domestic violence organization come chat to them about what they do. He also didn't know about that there are HR rules around you have to give time off to victims of domestic violence to deal with their life. I'm not and completely in the know of all those parameters, but I do know people who do know those parameters and they work at the domestic violence organization. He really was interested in having those people come chat with him. So when you reach out to these organizations, and here's the second biggie that he said to me, what can the organization do for him? He goes, I'm not wanting them to send him clients. He goes, I'm not against a new client, he said. But what can they do for him? He has a certain amount of financial education he has to do. And sticking within that same vein of domestic violence, I told him, and this was not a conversation around the domestic violence organization. I just knew of these ties with the banks, right? Because I had worked with that organization. I told him that domestic violence organizations almost always have some kind of financial education that they provide victims, and that his bank could be a part of that also. And he said, I am required to teach financial education a certain amount of hours. This is all part of some a reach out that was required. I think it started around the time of the bank failures. And so banks were required to do this community funding. They have to give out a certain amount of money. They have to be involved in their community and they have to do financial education. Wow. I can think of many, 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 many organizations that would love to have banks doing financial education for their people. I know a nonprofit that deals solely with housing. Goodness sakes, what a perfect tie-in. I know many food shelters who would love to do budgeting and financial education for their people to have an opportunity. They would have to sign up for that, correct? It's it's a win-win. Even youth organizations. Wow, I know lots of youth organizations that would love to have banks do financial education for them. I frankly can think of very few nonprofits that couldn't find some kind of tie-in with the needs of the bank. So this gentleman said to me, he had toured a nonprofit that on their request, and he's kind, remember? And he said he didn't have a relationship with them, but he agreed to tour their nonprofit. And he did tour the nonprofit. And he found them to be a wonderful organization. But he pointed out they don't have a real tie with us. And he was explaining that to the executive director when he said, a person who was not the executive director, he said it was a person who was working on some things, maybe a maintenance person, but it was a gentleman who turned to him and said, "What can we do for you?" And he said it set him back on his heels. He said no nonprofit in his whole career, a 40-year career, he's the same age as I am, no one had ever asked him from a nonprofit, "What can we do for you?" Well, they deserved from that, and then thinking about some ways that they can interact with the bank, they they created an opportunity with that one question for a donation. He wasn't going to follow through until that was asked of him. And he noted that to me because I'm in the field and he wanted to make sure I understood that he'd never been asked that before. And you may be a banker and you're listening to this and said, "Well, I've been asked that before." But I would hazard a guess you haven't been asked that on the regular. And I can assure you that every single nonprofit I have ever worked with, and I've worked with a lot of nonprofits, both as an employee and a consultant and coach, that is not the first thing they ask. I have asked that on a couple of occasions because I try to increase the number of contacts, 5 to 7 touch points with a donor, and you're going to create a higher level donation and a longer lasting relationship. So I stick with that. And the more that we can perhaps, and I'll use the domestic violence that I was consulting with. So if we reach out to said bank who's doing Jean's Day and bring the dog, children and puppies, right? We can't bring the kids we're rescuing, but we can bring a dog, right? The therapy dog. That increases the touch points. We not only went over and picked up a check and shook a hand, we went over, picked up a check, shook a hand, and let them pet our dog and took a whole bunch of photos with the doggy. Know that dog and the photos with the dog are going to end up on their social media or their newsletter or something, or at least somebody's phones, right? So that increased a touch point. And then asking, who started this program? And then we were able to chat with the vice president in depth about how she started that program and create a newsletter article in our newsletter about what she did. That made another touch point with that organization. Then when that newsletter came out, I was able to take that newsletter over to the bank with multiple copies with big pictures of that doggy being hugged by their employees and give it to that vice president and the tellers and the people all over the building. They got newsletters printed out. Did we print hundreds and hundreds of newsletters? No, it was a digital newsletter, but we printed that newsletter out to take to that building because I wanted to increase those touch points 5 to 7 times to touch each individual major donor, to increase that relationship and increase the gift. It's my job to do that. That's what I do. And so not all nonprofit funding folks do that because their main job may not be to do that. Their main job may be to rescue people, and that's great. But if you don't invest that time, which costs money, doesn't it? It costs time and commitment and thought and planning, and that costs money. But if you don't invest in that, you don't come out on the end. I know that organization with an emergency can go to that bank and make a major ask and be heard and probably receive major funding because they took the time to invest in that organization. They took the time to invest in the human beings in that organization. They not only have that bank as a donor in their donor management software, they have the human beings' names connected, and they know who is responsible for that gift. And that's where this other banking institution was letting me know that when he was a speaker at this event, they didn't have the names of who's responsible for the donations. They just sent the request for the donation to the bank, and the bank sent it to the committee, and the committee had no idea they had a tie to the organization until he reached out to and like made the connection, and they doubled their donation. So you can see where I'm going here. It's not the organization that donates, it's the humans that are in the organization and have the connectivity to you. So if there is a to do from this conversation right here, you must go into your donor base and make sure that you have a relationship with the human being behind each corporate donation. If you have the bank president as the person behind the donation for the bank, you had better know that that bank president actually makes that decision. That bank president literally is the person that when you walk in the room or someone from your organization walks in the room, that they drop what they're doing or turn and say, "Hello, your name. I'm so glad you stopped by." If you don't have that relationship with the person that is connected to that business or bank, we stay with the bank. If you don't have that relationship with that banker, then that's not the right name. That's not the right name at all. Because the name signed the check doesn't mean that's who you have a relation. You don't have a relationship. You have a signature. Write down the name of the organization. Call the organization and say, "I sure would like to personally thank whoever is part of this decision process. We appreciate this donation, and I'd love to bring them a coffee." Who might that be? And they will tell you, or they'll say, "I'll find out for you." And you're going to be surprised. More often than not, it is not the person you have connected. As I said, you just have the person that's on, sign the check, or you have the person that shows up in all the media, and you need to go have coffee or bring, a gift basket of a little chocolate or in a coffee mug. It's so easy to find a little gift just to say, "Thank you. Thank you for being the conduit. And would you like to hear what we did with your gift?" They not only want to hear what you did, that thank you. Thank you is imperative. Many, many thank yous. Touch 5 to 7 times, remember? So at least a thank you note, but then a thank you in person. And then I want you to tell them what you did with gifts like theirs and tell them a good story, one that brings a little tear to their eye. I also want you to write a note to their boss. I want you to find out who their boss is. If their boss is hanging out and wondering why the teller is getting chocolate from you and over their shoulder, and it's like, "This is my boss, Joanne," then you send your hand out and you say, Joanne, I just want to shake your hand and say thank you for giving the time to this employee to do the good work that she has been doing. Make sure her boss knows. If her boss isn't anywhere around that day, then you write a note, a handwritten note, thanking them for the time that they have given to this person to, to help with your organization's mission. And let them know what the bank's donation in the note, say your donation helped, whatever it did. Your donation helped fill the pantry at our domestic violence shelter. Our our XYZ person, our shelter manager told me that with the secured funds to feel a little more flexible, they were able to put on quite a lovely Easter celebration, and the children had a very special Easter egg hunt because your donation came in at just the right time when our shelter's shelves were quite sparse, and we knew that Easter was going to be very plain. But because of your donation, our Easter was joyous. Thank you. That's simple. That's telling them on a very small donation what it did directly to your mission. And I don't care what your mission is, you can come up with a lovely 3 to 4 sentence explanation of what donations like theirs. If you say, well, their donation wasn't designated, just say, donations, your donation and others like it did XYZ. Or donations like yours did XYZ. It's they're reading it as their donation and they understand they went into a bigger pot and together they created something better than they could have done on their own. Never doubt that your organization's work isn't important to them, but they have to know what you did. So build that relationship. Ask what you can do for them. I don't care what you do. If you are a nonprofit, I'm just trying to think of little nonprofits that I know about. And I know about a nonprofit that helps to build and repair bikes and make sure they get into children's hands that are low income, and helmets, bike helmets. That's all this little nonprofit does. It doesn't have full-time staff, but it does about 3 times a year ask for donations to make sure they have the funds available to keep up with the gifting of bikes and helmets to children of low income on the inner city. And wow, what a time to be able to take pictures of adults putting together bikes. If you have permission, take pictures of the children riding their new bikes. Make sure that the organization knows what you're doing, but what can you do for them? You can make sure and tell them when you are coming up for time periods when you would need names of children's and family that would like bikes, because you could provide to them a layout through Canva free of a 1/3 page, which is just the right size to maybe go into, like, when people cash their checks and come through the drive-through of the bank. You could provide them with the art and they would print it. I know they would. Banks are great about this. To give to all their customers to make sure people know that the bikes are available on certain dates, and this is how they go about getting a bike, or this is how they go about donating a bike, and that it's handed out at the window when people have they cash checks and come through the drive-through. A thing where the bank lets the community know, this is what we do for you. We donate to this. Would you like to participate also? Do you need a bike? Would you like to donate a bike? So you can see how even a little nonprofit that gives away bicycles can help a bank. You can help the bank let people know they are a community member who cares about them. And it increases your footprint because then people come get the bikes and other people give bikes. Oh my gosh. That's just off the top of my head. I don't care if what your nonprofit is. I challenge you. You can make a connectivity to the company that you are asking for money from. The third thing that the bank mentioned was a bit of his own confusion around giving levels and sponsorships. And I think that nonprofits, many times, we confuse people, don't we? We think, okay, we need these giving levels. And then other times we say, you get your name on our t-shirt. You get your name on our social media. You get your name, we thank you publicly at the dinner. We get your blah, 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 blah. That is a sponsorship package. And that is marketing. And many times it comes out of the marketing line item at the business. And a donation, a philanthropic donation, doesn't have strings to it. It doesn't require you to do a flyer with them at the window. That's just a fun partnership that grows your relationship with the organization. Philanthropic gift is a gift with no strings attached. A sponsorship is a package, usually a giving level with things given back to the bank. When you do that, it's usually a package in a binder, not just sloppily emailed. And these are the levels you can give. When we use the levels that you can give as a crutch, we are muddying the water. This is a whole nother podcast, isn't it? I could really go depth on that. But here's the real clue that this banker who has worked 40 years in the business and worked with you and other organizations as a board member and a fund drive chair, and on it goes. For 40 years, he's been that guy for the banks he's worked with. And he's confused about banks and what they receive, because it's not a non-altruistic way of thinking. He said, but I do have a job, and that job is to grow the bank. So when they give us marketing, I'm appreciative of that. And when the fellow asked, what can we do for you? I was like, well, what can you do for us? But those are really two different jobs, aren't they? So the sponsorship levels, or the levels of giving, are in general for marketing and for sponsorships on programs. But over here on philanthropy, using your sponsorship levels as a crutch when you're asking confuses the donor. So I highly suggest that you don't use your levels of giving over here on regular philanthropy. I know many of you have it. Like, I'd probably say 60 to 70%. But that's not what you want to do. You want to identify. So this bank has in the past given $2,000 a year to your organization. If you're wanting to up that amount, you would look at, what do you want to do with that money? And programmatically say, I would like to see us feel more secure in our mission in this area. In order to do that, we are asking you for an increase from $2,000 to $4,000 this year. And then you shut up and you let them answer. Now, you've been told this before, but this is the nerve-wracking part, isn't it? But don't be shy. They care also. The worst case scenario is they're going to say, no, we can't do that. We have to stick with the 2,000. And they could just leave it there. But the majority of them, the majority say, but next year in our budgeting, we could look at a $1,000 increase rather than a doubling, we could do a $3,000. Other ways to approach them, and I'm just throwing these out there because that's what this is. And I want to assure you that with some coaching, there's other ways of doing this, right? You could even ask for a 3-year commitment and have a total, so doubling over 3 years. So from 2 to 3 to 6. Yes, that is a huge jump on the 6, but they have 3 years to ramp up for it. And what are you doing for that? And during that time, we're going to really robustly ensure that this program is working for the community you serve. And during that time, we'd like you to partner with us, and don't use that word just with the donation, because he also brought that up. He said, when I heard the word partner, they just want me to donate money. No, you're going to use it in the correct term and say, we'd love for you to partner with us because we would like us to have your organization teach financial wellness for and offer it as a class for the people we serve. And we'd like for your organization to let community members through your drive-through know about these 2 opportunities. And we'd like your organization to feel free to call upon our organization to help you with your human resources should you have any clients or even customers that need our services, right? So you found 3 opportunities for them to truly partner for their elevated donation over a 3-year time span. This year staying the same, next year going from 2,000 to 3,000, but the next year, because they've had through 2 years to really see the value that you're bringing to them in this relationship and to the community, not just to them, but to the community, right? In the 3rd year, it's a big ask. It's 6,000. What do they get for that major gift? Well, they're not just getting their name on a gold plaque, that's put in the hallway of the room where the project is happening. Maybe it's a daycare. I don't know. But they're getting actual interaction and partnership at the community level. So you can see how you can make a relationship grow and replace other grant funding and make it so that in an emergent situation, you feel more secure about your mission and programming moving into the future. Again, if you would like more coaching in this vein, I'm happy to chat with you. My website has several opportunities for you to have a free 30-minute conversation with me to see whether we're right for each other. And then you can join our coaching, which is easy to do. And I have a link for you down below for the free 30-minute conversation.